10 minutes on the Briar Road. The young officer pushed Dr. Lorraine Hayes down onto the cold pavement, pulled her wrists behind her back, and locked the cuffs into place. He believed he had stopped a woman impersonating one of the most powerful officials in America. He did not know that 8 miles away, 22,000 people were gathering beneath festival lights. He did not know that a stolen maintenance truck had just cleared the final checkpoint. And he did not know that the warning on his patrol computer had been written for him personally. Officer Evan Cole stood over her with the credential in his hand. The road was narrow, bordered by tall Pennsylvania pines, and late sunlight lay in long bars across the cracked asphalt. Somewhere past the trees, a marching band was tuning up in Briar Glen, where the Heritage Festival had already begun. Lorraine turned her cheek against the pavement. She was 59, in a dark suit under a gray overcoat, silver at her temples, dust on one sleeve. She did not look frightened. She looked like someone counting. "Officer Cole," she said. She had read his badge before he forced her down. "The credential in your hand is authentic. Call the number on the back and request Raven clearance." He looked at the card again. Homeland Security seal, her photograph. An encrypted strip and a title he had never seen outside a briefing slide. Secretary of Homeland Security. The system says you don't exist. The system has been compromised. That's exactly what someone with a fake card would say. The alert had reached his cruiser 11 minutes earlier, under the header of the Federal Protective Communications Network, in the red banner reserved for urgent threats. Female subject impersonating senior federal official, black Chevrolet Suburban, may present fraudulent DHS credentials. Do not allow entry to Briar Glen restricted zone. Detain pending federal response. It had listed her approximate age, her height, her vehicle registration. It had even warned that she might claim the network itself was compromised. Everything matched. "Ask your dispatcher which agency confirmed that order," Lorraine said. "Stop talking. You are not being protected by that message. You are being used by it." He stepped closer. "I said stop." She studied him. 28, maybe. Pressed uniform, polished boots, the careful bearing of a man who had spent his life preparing to be taken seriously, and was terrified of the moment someone noticed he was still learning. She had known men like him in every agency she had ever led. Some became thoughtful officers. Some became dangerous. The difference usually arrived in a single minute, when fear demanded certainty and pride refused to ask one more question. "Use your personal phone," she said. "Call the State Fusion Center on an independent line, not your computer, not your department channel. You want me to break procedure? I want you to find out who wrote the procedure you're following." The pavement began to hum beneath her shoulder. 8 armored SUVs came around the western bend with their headlights on, strobes flashing discreetly behind the grills. At the center was a command vehicle bearing a small White House communications emblem. Doors opened before the wheels had fully stopped. Men and women in dark suits stepped out and formed a perimeter, not around Lorraine, but around Evan. "Hands where we can see them." He raised them. "I'm a police officer. I detained a federal impersonator." A tall woman with iron-gray hair came from the lead vehicle. Special Agent Mara Vance, White House Emergency Protective Detail. 30 years of walking into rooms where mistakes changed history. She looked once at the woman on the ground. "Unlock those cuffs. I received a federal alert." "Officer," her voice dropped into a dangerous calm. "That is Dr. Lorraine Hayes, Secretary of Homeland Security. Remove the restraints." The color left his face. For several seconds he did not seem to breathe. Then he reached for the key, and his hands were no longer steady. Lorraine stood without taking the hand Vance offered. She brushed the dust from her coat, looked at the red marks circling her wrists, and turned toward him. "Madam Secretary, She raised one finger. "Not yet." Mara opened the rear door of the command SUV. "Ma'am, the White House is waiting on your decision." The festival music was still playing. Children were still laughing under strings of lights. Somewhere among them, a stolen county truck was moving toward its position. Lorraine checked her watch. 9 minutes. "Bring Officer Cole," she said, "and his patrol computer. Do not shut it down." Evan stared at her. "You wanted a federal response," she said. "You're about to get one." The conference room beneath DHS headquarters had no windows and no signal. A map of Briar Glen filled one wall, red circles marking the courthouse square, the abandoned textile mill, the old waterworks, the festival grounds along Willow River. The threat had begun as a fragment recovered from an unrelated case in Maryland, the Breyer Signal, Founders Day, a gate that must remain open. Analysts had filed it as boasting from the American Restoration Front, a small extremist network broken by arrests years before. Then a county maintenance truck vanished from a garage outside town. A book of temporary festival credentials vanished with it. 2 nights later, cameras caught 3 men studying the access roads. The evidence never revealed what they intended. It revealed something worse. Every time investigators adjusted surveillance, the suspects changed routes within the hour. Requested county footage came back already erased. The stolen truck's identification number was pulled from the statewide system before it reached a single patrol unit. The leak was not in Briar Glen. It was inside the federal response. "We postpone," the FBI representative said. "Cite a utility failure." 22,000 people are already in that town, or driving toward it, Lorraine said. A sudden cancellation creates exactly the crowd movement they may be waiting for. A weather advisory, then. The sky is clear for 200 miles. A gas leak. And teach every future cell that they can force the government to lie to the public on demand. Then what? She touched the circle marking the waterworks. The festival continues. Local officials quietly narrow access. Cleared federal crews replace county maintenance. We find the truck before it reaches the square. Her chief of staff, Camille Brooks, looked up from her tablet. There's a complication. The memorandum on the screen advised that the secretary should not travel to Briar Glen, as her presence might interfere with the chain of command. It carried the approval of Deputy Undersecretary Nathan Caldwell, who supervised information sharing between DHS intelligence and regional law enforcement, and who was one of 7 people who could alter the interagency warning network without immediate secondary approval. He also asked that all field decisions route through his office until this resolves, Camille said. Why would a deputy undersecretary issue travel guidance to the secretary? The Secret Service representative asked. He wouldn't, Lorraine said, unless he wanted a record showing he tried to keep me away. Are you saying Caldwell is the leak? I'm saying we don't know who is. From this moment, no operational change leaves this room. She turned to Camille. Send the motorcade to Andrews. File a flight plan to Harrisburg. And you? I drive. 2 agents ahead of me in a second civilian car. No plates, no route upload. Agent Vance's team stages outside the county on the White House Channel and waits for my beacon. She looked around the table. Caldwell can't touch that network without exposing himself. Camille studied her. You think someone will try to stop you? I think someone already has. Lorraine had spent 30 years learning that the dangerous part of an institution is almost never the locked door. It is the trusted person who knows where the key is kept. She left through the service garage 40 minutes later in a black Suburban drawn from an evidence fleet. No seal, no flag, no driver but herself. Her father had been a postal carrier in Montgomery who spread road atlases across the kitchen table and showed her how highways curved around wealthy neighborhoods and how bus lines stopped short of certain hospitals. A road is never only a road, he told her. It's a decision somebody made about who gets through. Her mother put it differently. Authority tells you where you may stand. Character tells you where you should. At 4:42, she crossed into Briar County. Camille's message arrived on the secure phone. Lead car held at Southern Checkpoint. Local network showing unauthorized activity. Lorraine typed one word, continuing. 6 miles out, a cruiser sat sideways across the lane beside a temporary barricade, and a young officer stepped into the road with his hand raised. She handed over her license and her credential, and watched his expression change, not to recognition, but to suspicion. He went back to his computer. 30 seconds later, he looked up sharply and reached for his radio. That was when she knew the leak had moved ahead of her. She could have triggered the beacon then. She didn't. It would summon Vance, but it would also announce her exact position to anyone monitoring regional emergency signals. And if the insider still didn't know which road she had taken, pressing it too early would give away the entire operation. She tried the truth twice more, then he ordered her out, took her phone, demanded the passcode, and told her to turn around. Before you decide, she said, ask yourself how a federal warning knew what I would be wearing. For half a second, the question reached him, then pride closed over it. She pulled away from his grip instinctively, and he took her to the pavement. The fall bruised her shoulder and tore the knee of her trousers. She did not cry out. She kept her cheek against the road, listened to the cuffs close, and pressed her thumb twice against the plain metal ring on her right hand. The signal reached Mara Vance 7 miles out. The command SUV accelerated toward town. Evan sat in a rear-facing seat between two agents, his patrol computer open on a secured table. President Rebecca Sloan appeared on the screen from the Situation Room. "Lorraine, we lost you. My route was compromised. The decoy? Followed nearly to Harrisburg. The aircraft also received a false diversion notice." Camille's face opened in a second window from the temporary command post at Briar Glen High School. "Madam Secretary, the stolen truck cleared checkpoint Delta 6 minutes ago, on valid county credentials. Its identification alert had been removed from the state system. Traffic cameras between Delta and the grounds went dark 30 seconds later." "Recommendations?" the president asked. 2 options sat on the table. Full evacuation, which would push 22,000 people onto 2 narrow bridges, possibly exactly what the cell was waiting for. Or a shelter order, which kept the crowd calm only if the truck was not already somewhere that made standing still worse. Lorraine turned. "Officer Cole, how many maintenance routes enter the festival zone past checkpoint Delta?" He was still pale. 3 official. Unofficial? 2. 1 behind the old textile mill. 1 follows the river access lane. Which one avoids cameras? The mill road. They never installed any, because the bridge is supposed to be closed. Will that bridge hold a maintenance truck? Technically, no. That wasn't my question. He swallowed. Yes, if the driver knows where the steel runs. Camille? Aerial surveillance to the textile mill. No sirens, no public alert. An official in the Situation Room started to object about delaying evacuation. Lorraine did not raise her voice. "We're not delaying. We're changing the shape of the response. Close both vehicle bridges under the cover of parade preparation. Stop outbound traffic. Keep pedestrian paths open. Plainclothes teams on every access lane. And have the fire company announce a safety demonstration at the north lawn." Camille understood. That pulls families off the southern service area without a word about danger. "Yes. Proceed," the president said. "One more thing," Lorraine added. "White House channel only. Treat every instruction originating from Caldwell's office as hostile until verified." In the back of the vehicle, Evan closed his eyes. "What is it?" "The alert told me not to call the fusion center. It said the impersonator might have people inside the state system." "Who issued it?" "No name. Just a system code." Mara turned the screen and examined the properties. "There's no originating sender field." "That happens with sealed federal notices," Evan said. "Not on this network. Sealed notices still generate an audit key." Lorraine leaned in. The timestamp read 4:48 p.m., the minute she crossed the county line. And the description of her clothing had not come from any planning document. She had chosen the gray overcoat on her way out of headquarters. Someone had seen her. Was there another unit near the county line? Evan thought. A state cruiser at the closed way station. I didn't see the driver. Mara spoke into her headset, and the answer came back within the minute. No state units had been assigned to that way station all day. So the operation was more than one man behind a desk. A watcher on the county line had passed her description to whoever controlled the alert network. "Officer Cole, dispatch told you a federal response was coming. Did they give you an arrival time?" "No." "Did you ask?" His face tightened. "No." "Why not?" "Because the alert said hold position." Lorraine let the silence stand. He had followed every instruction exactly. That was what made the plan work. The insider had never needed to control what Evan did. He had only needed to predict it. Flags hung from the lampposts along Main Street. Storefronts displayed photographs of the town's founding families. Railroad workers, nurses, farmers, soldiers. For 70 years, the Heritage Festival had opened on the first Saturday in October, beginning as a supper for returning veterans and growing into a parade and then into this. The same choir sang before sunset. The same volunteer company ladled bean soup from cast-iron pots. The same bell rang at 6 to honor the residents who had died that year. Tradition was the town's way of telling time. Evelyn Moore was arranging name cards at the information booth when a plainclothes agent approached and explained, carefully, that the fire company needed to run an unexpected demonstration on the north lawn. She was 68, a retired librarian in bright blue glasses who could still name every child who had ever borrowed a book from her. "Is there danger?" We're taking precautions. That isn't what I asked. We need people to move off the southern service area, without alarm. She looked at the families by the food stalls. Then she nodded. Give me 3 minutes. She took the microphone from a bluegrass singer and smiled at the square. Ladies and gentlemen, Chief Donnelly informs me our volunteer firefighters have a surprise for the children on the north lawn. Since these brave people spend most of the year rescuing the rest of us from our own cooking, I believe we owe them an audience. Laughter moved across the crowd. Parents gathered children. Musicians shifted north. Vendors turned their signs. No siren. No one ran. The square emptied southward to northward, guided not by fear, but by a voice the town had trusted for 19 years. Watching the aerial feed from the convoy, Lorraine asked who had made the announcement. Evelyn Moore, Camille said, festival chair. Find her afterward. I want to thank her for understanding public safety better than half of Washington. 2 minutes later, surveillance located the stolen truck under a loading canopy behind the abandoned mill, 300 yards from the festival's southern boundary. The driver's door stood open. The cab was empty. A white cargo van had left the property just before the cameras failed. Possible transfer, Mara said. The truck might be the weapon, or it might be the misdirection. Evan leaned forward. Can you zoom on the mill road? The image enlarged. A pale line of dust crossed the pavement near the canopy. That's not road dust, that's limestone. There's a quarry road east of the river. Delivery vans use it to skip the way station. So the van never passed checkpoint Delta, Lorraine said, or it entered town hours ago. Then he shook his head. No, look, the powder's only under the rear tires. The fronts are clean. It backed onto the quarry road and never drove it. Somebody spread limestone behind it to fake the trail. How do you know that? My father worked traffic investigations. He taught me to check all 4 tires before guessing where a vehicle went. It was the first personal thing he had said. Then where does the real route go? If they left by the river lane, they'd come into the grounds through the old waterworks gate. A gate that must remain open. Nathan Caldwell entered the high school command post at 5:14 in a charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase. 2 security officers greeted him with visible relief. Deputy Undersecretary. We didn't expect you. Neither did the secretary, apparently. He had the gift of making urgency sound like reason. Where is she? En route to the waterworks. A shadow crossed behind his eyes. Too fast to catch. She's in the county. 20 minutes now, sir. Which channel is she using? White House Emergency Network. Of course she is. He moved toward the operations room. I need the incident server. An officer stepped in front of the door. I'm sorry, sir. The secretary ordered all systems isolated from your office until the compromise is resolved. Do you understand my clearance? Yes, sir. We received a formal directive from the White House. May I see it? The officer glanced at his colleague. That hesitation was enough. Caldwell opened the briefcase, took out a Federal Communications tablet, and pressed his thumb to the screen. Every monitor in the hallway went black, and the doors locked. He walked past the 2 men while their radios filled with static, connected the tablet to the isolated server, and watched a countdown replace the map on the wall. 4 minutes, 32 seconds. He had built a career on the belief that order does not come from trust. It comes from fear. He had grown up in a house where silence was called respect and obedience was praised above truth, and he had learned in government what he suspected in childhood, that people do not need to believe a lie forever. They only need to believe it long enough. Long enough to vote, long enough to turn on a neighbor, long enough to follow a bad order, long enough to let a truck through a gate. He had never considered himself one of the Restoration Front. He found their language crude. But he shared their conviction that the country had become too uncertain to govern itself, and he had prepared, in advance, a reform plan centralizing emergency authority under an office he expected to lead. All it required was a failure in a small American town, and a nation frightened enough to want someone decisive. Lorraine Hayes stood at the center of everything he resented. She listened before giving orders. She promoted people who argued with her, and she had become respected without ever becoming feared. When redirecting her convoy failed, he had gone looking for a roadblock. Evan Cole's personnel file offered 3 useful facts: near-perfect procedural compliance scores, almost no experience with federal credentials, and a formal counseling 2 years earlier after he handled a black motorist more aggressively than the situation required. Caldwell had not needed him to be a bigot. He had only needed an unexamined suspicion and a warning built to feed it. At the waterworks gate, a county worker lay unconscious beside the guardhouse, breathing, his jacket and badge missing. The gate stood open. Inside, the air smelled of rust and machine oil. Old pipes crossed the ceiling above a service corridor running toward the festival grounds. "A van could fit through here," Evan said. "You've been inside?" "As a kid, my father brought me during flood inspections." Halfway down, Mara's radio died. The lights stuttered. Every phone in the corridor displayed the same line. "Emergency authority transfer in progress." "Caldwell," Lorraine said. Machinery groaned somewhere ahead. Evan turned toward the sound. "That's the floodgate. It's closing." The old works included a heavy control gate between the service tunnel and the river channel. Lowered, it would seal the fastest route between federal teams and the southern boundary. "How long?" 3 minutes. Manual overrides in the lower pump room. "We continue toward the festival," Mara said. "If that gate drops, your teams are on the wrong side. The main road adds 15 minutes. The number sat in the air. 10 minutes had already put a truck through a checkpoint. Lorraine faced him. "Can you reach the override?" "Yes." "Are you certain?" "No." It was the first honest answer he had given her. "Send one agent with him," she told Mara. "He's still in detention." "He also knows this building." Evan stared at her. "After what I did, you trust me?" "No. I trust that you finally admitted uncertainty. Don't make me regret the distinction." The pump room was half dark and knee-deep in cold water from a broken line. Evan hauled at the steel wheel. It didn't move. "Locked," Agent Reyes said. "No. Pressure's holding it." His father's voice arrived as clearly as if the man were standing beside him in the water. "Don't fight pressure head-on. Find what feeds it." Michael Cole had served 32 years with the county, most of them working traffic investigations. Patient in public, exacting at home. He corrected Evan's grammar and inspected his shoes before church, and refused to let him blame anyone else for a failure. When Evan was 17 and complained that a teacher disliked him, his father asked whether he had done the work. "Most of it." "Then you're asking me to defend the part of you that failed." He died of cancer 6 months before Evan entered the academy. On their last morning, he took his old badge from a drawer and put it in his son's hand. "This isn't a crown. It's a promise to slow down when everybody else is frightened." Evan had carried that for years. On the road, when a woman he did not believe had told him to slow down, he had moved faster instead. He had mistaken control for safety. Now there were thousands of people above his head, and the one he'd put on the pavement had sent him down here to help. He found the pressure release behind a rusted panel. He and Reyes opened it together. Water roared through the overflow pipe, and the wheel loosened in his hands. They turned it until the descending gate shuddered to a stop. The corridor stayed open. The service tunnel led out behind a row of food trucks on a lawn that was nearly empty now. The white van was parked beside the remembrance stage, tucked between 2 vendor vehicles. A man in a county maintenance jacket was walking away from it with a black equipment case. Aaron Voss, 43, former electrical contractor, a suspected organizer within the network. He looked toward the waterworks gate. He saw her. Then he ran. Agents moved after him. Lorraine did not. He had left the van too easily. He wanted to be chased. She turned and looked at the festival instead. The crowd was on the north lawn, exactly where federal instructions had put them, a ladder truck throwing an arch of water into the gold light, while children screamed with delight underneath it. And near the stage stood the memorial bell, where at 6 o'clock, Evelyn Moore would ring once for each name read aloud. Beside it was a new metal control box wired to the festival lighting. It had not been in the morning's security photographs. "Check the bell platform," Lorraine said. Behind it, a thin cable ran under the decorative bunting and disappeared into the grass, heading toward the textile mill. The stolen truck had never been meant to enter the festival. It had been meant to pull the search toward the mill. The van had never been the device. It had carried the equipment needed to reach the festival's electrical system. The real plan had been sitting in plain sight beneath the one ceremony the whole town was guaranteed to watch. Her secure phone lit. Caldwell's face, the darkened command center behind him. "Madam Secretary, you arrived after all." She kept her eyes away from the platform. "Nathan." I regret the confusion at the roadblock. It was never personal. Men like you always say that, after building something around another person's identity. You think this is about race. I think you picked an officer whose assumptions you had already read. You knew what he would see when a black woman handed him credentials he didn't expect her to have. I picked a predictable officer. You picked a weakness in him that resembled a weakness in you. Behind him, a countdown fell past 2 minutes. You sent Voss into a town full of people and expected him to hold to your schedule. He understands the necessity. He understands anger. Angry men don't protect careful plans, they protect themselves. He left the van and ran before he finished. She watched the pause land. You never trusted him with the whole picture, did you? Same as Officer Cole. You gave each man exactly enough truth to behave the way you needed. Caldwell said nothing. Lorraine covered the phone. Find the physical trigger, she told Mara. Don't touch the box until technicians arrive. Then, to the agents by the generator, cut all stage power, full mechanical separation. Evelyn came at her signal. Madam Secretary, what do you need? How is the bell rung? By hand. And if the stage power fails, we continue without it. We did for 50 years. Caldwell had built his plan on the assumption that the festival depended on its wiring. It did not. The ceremony was older than the wires. At 6 o'clock, Lorraine said, don't ring the bell. Evelyn searched her face. May I ask why? Because someone expects you to. Then it stays silent. The technicians pulled the main switch. The speakers cut out. The lights along the square went dark, and the crowd murmured. 20 seconds, 10, 5. The countdown reached 0, vanished, and was replaced by a single line. Remote activation failed. He had expected a surge to ignite incendiary material set beneath the empty section of the memorial platform. Fire, panic, and 22,000 people driven toward 2 bridges where the rest of it waited. The plan had needed timing, electricity, and predictable human behavior. She had broken all 3. For the first time, fear reached his face. Then something worse replaced it. You believe this was the only location? Mara's radio came back to life mid-sentence. Possible secondary threat. North Lawn. Voss had let himself be caught near the courthouse. The equipment case was empty. He had not been fleeing. He had been dragging security north. Beside the ladder truck, in the middle of the families, stood a fuel delivery trailer. It had arrived that morning on valid emergency service credentials, cleared by the same compromised system that had cleared the truck. How fast can you move them? Lorraine asked. Evelyn followed her eyes. Not fast enough. Not without panic. The church choir stood waiting nearby for the evening hymn. Evelyn took the arm of its director, an elderly man named Samuel Price. Sam, start the remembrance procession. It's 20 minutes early. Start it. Without the bell? Without the bell. He looked at her for one moment, then turned to his singers. They formed 2 lines, and without microphones, they began a hymn that nearly everyone in the town had known since childhood. The voices carried across the lawn, thin and unhurried, and people turned toward them. Evelyn stepped in front. Friends, we'll be holding the ceremony by the courthouse today. Come along and bring the children. No siren, no announcement, no shouted order. The choir simply walked, and the families followed. Veterans rose from folding chairs. Parents lifted toddlers. Teenagers carried the tables aside. In 2 minutes, the north lawn was clear. The technicians found an ignition device fixed beneath the trailer frame and disabled it without incident. The trailer itself carried nothing but ordinary fuel. The danger had never been the size of the device. It was the panic it was designed to cause. In the command center, Caldwell disconnected his tablet and walked to the exit. He had written the door override himself. He entered the code and the panel turned red. Behind him, every monitor came back on at once, filled with the president's face. Nathan Caldwell, step away from the door. Agents entered through the secondary access. His own emergency transfer protocol had handed him the building and generated a mirrored record inside the White House network. Every command copied, every false alert carrying his signature. He put both hands on the nearest table. This administration has no idea what's coming. What's coming, Mr. Caldwell, is an investigation. You think arresting me changes the truth? No, the president said. The truth is how we found you. Lorraine stood beside the silent bell while technicians cleared the platform. Both devices secure, no injuries. The county worker concussed but stable. Voss and Caldwell in custody. She released a breath she had been holding for an hour. Then Evan came up the corridor from the waterworks, trousers soaked to the knee, rust on his hands. He stopped several feet away and took off his cap. The confidence he'd carried at the roadblock was gone. I don't expect forgiveness. That's sensible. I believed the alert. You also believed yourself. He looked up. The message was built to deceive you, she said. That matters. It doesn't cover what you chose after the questions started. I should have made the call. Yes? I shouldn't have put you on the ground. No. She let a moment pass. You kept thinking the more certain I sounded, the more dangerous I had to be. Why? He struggled with it. Because the warning said you'd try to take control. And when you looked at me, was that easier to believe? His face tightened. He could have denied it. Yes, he said finally, almost too quietly to hear. It was not an apology. It was the beginning of one. There'll be an investigation, she said. You'll be judged for the roadblock. You'll also be credited for the gate and the false trail. That doesn't balance it. No, good actions aren't coins you set on the other side of a scale. Then why did you bring me? She looked toward the courthouse, where candles were being passed hand to hand in the dark, the ceremony continuing exactly as it had for 70 years. Because you had information we needed, and because I wanted you to see what your certainty nearly helped accomplish. At 6:20, she gave the briefing from the courthouse steps, standing with the county sheriff, Chief Donnelly, and Evelyn Moore. No stage, no banners. A reporter called out, "Is it true you were detained by a local officer?" Yes. Was the detention racially motivated? The question hung over the lawn. She could have answered it in one word. The officer received a fraudulent federal warning, written by someone who understood how fear, authority, and bias reinforce one another. The warning created the situation. His unexamined assumptions made it more dangerous. Are you defending him? No. Accusing him? Describing him. Did the delay let the suspect vehicle into the festival zone? Yes. Then his actions could have caused a national tragedy. Lorraine looked into the cameras. So could the actions of a senior federal official with an impressive resume. Danger doesn't always arrive looking dangerous, and authority doesn't always arrive in the form we expect. By nightfall, the country had divided the day into pieces small enough to carry. Hero, villain, victim, procedure, prejudice. The truth kept refusing to fit. Evan had been deceived, and he had failed. Caldwell had exploited bias and hierarchy, and the reflex of institutions to trust their own paperwork. Lorraine had been humiliated, and had gone on being responsible for 22,000 people with the marks of steel still on her wrists. The festival had been saved by federal agents, and by a retired librarian, an old choir director, a volunteer fire company, and several thousand people willing to follow one another without running. At the Senate hearing 4 months later, Lorraine was asked whether the operation had been a success. Partly, she said. We identified a compromised network, and no one was hurt. We also learned that I was wrong about the festival. The chairman asked her to clarify. I argued against postponement because a cancellation could create the panic the cell wanted. That reasoning was sound, and the decision was mine, and it left 22,000 civilians inside a threat zone we did not yet understand. It worked. It should not have had to. Later, asked about the false alert, she said the sentence that outlived the hearing. The most dangerous lie isn't the one that hides from questions. It's the one that teaches you to treat questions as threats. The independent review found that Evan had lawful grounds to make the stop, and that he had violated policy by refusing independent verification, escalating without resistance, and applying restraints before requesting a supervisor. It also found his judgment affected by implicit racial bias and by over-reliance on authority-based threat messaging. He accepted the findings. 6-month suspension, mandatory retraining, 2 years of supervised status. The union offered to appeal, and he declined. He asked to see the full body camera recording. His attorney advised against it. You already know what happened. No, Evan said. I know what I remember. He watched it alone. It showed a woman stopping calmly, presenting documents, requesting outside verification 4 separate times. It showed the exact second uncertainty crossed his own face, and the second after, when he answered that uncertainty by tightening his grip. The hardest part was not seeing her on the pavement. It was hearing his own voice. "Stop talking. Hands behind your back." Hard, certain, faintly pleased with itself. He did not recognize the man speaking. Then he understood that recognition wasn't required. He wrote her 3 letters. The first explained the alert and the pressure, and his lack of training. The second praised her leadership. He tore up both. The third was 1 page. "Madam Secretary, I am sorry for what I did. The false alert explains why I became suspicious. It does not explain why I stopped listening. You gave me several ways to find the truth, and I treated every one of them as another reason to control you. I believed admitting uncertainty would make me weaker. Refusing it made me dangerous." Evan Cole. She read it twice, folded it, and put it in the drawer where she kept letters from families she had met after storms and fires. She did not answer right away. Apologies are easy to reward too quickly, and a person can mistake forgiveness for completion. At his retraining, an instructor put a photograph on the screen. A woman face down on a road in Pennsylvania. Evan considered leaving the room, and stayed. Who failed here? The answers came from around the room: the network, the dispatcher, the officer, the chain of command, the man who wrote the warning. All correct, the instructor said. Now tell me who could have interrupted it. The room went quiet. Evan raised his hand. Afterward, an officer from Chicago stopped him in the corridor. "You're Cole. My daughter watched that video. She's 16. She asked me why the secretary's identification didn't protect her. What did you tell her?" "That identification only works when the person reading it is willing to believe you belong." Evelyn Moore's invitation was handwritten. The platform had been rebuilt. The bell had been inspected and declared sound. Last year, someone tried to turn our traditions into instruments of fear. This year we would like to use them for what they were made for: remembering one another. Lorraine's staff advised against going. Caldwell's trial was approaching. The press would be heavy. Demonstrators from both directions would likely appear. She accepted. She arrived on a clear October afternoon, this time with government plates and a full detail, and no one stopped her on the road. Flags on the lampposts, bean soup in the cast-iron pots, children running on the courthouse lawn. The festival looked almost unchanged. That was the victory. A new plaque stood beside the bell. It named no one and mentioned nothing. For all who chose calm over fear, duty over pride, and one another over themselves. Who wrote it? Lorraine asked. The council argued over 12 versions, Evelyn said. That's the one nobody hated. That may be the purest form of democracy. At 6, Samuel Price and the choir sang the same hymn that had walked a town out of danger. The names were read: farmers, teachers, veterans, factory workers, and one newborn who had lived 3 days. After each, the crowd answered, "We remember." When the last name was read, Evelyn turned to her. "Would you ring it?" Lorraine put both hands on the rope. At the edge of the crowd, Evan Cole stood in uniform again, no stripes on the sleeve, his posture quieter than she remembered. Their eyes met. He didn't come forward. He only nodded. She pulled. The bell sounded once across the square, deep, clear, unbroken. Afterward, she found him near the courthouse steps. 3 weeks back on duty, he said. How does it feel? Different. Different isn't always better. No, ma'am. Is it? I think it can be. What changed? He took a moment. I used to think my job was to take control before anything went wrong. Now I think it's to understand what's happening before I decide control is necessary. That's slower. Yes. Does that frighten you? Sometimes. Good. He almost smiled. I expected you to say fear was the problem. Fear is information. Pride is what stops you from reading it. A group of children ran past with paper lanterns. One stumbled. Evan's hand came up and then stopped as the boy's mother caught him, and the boy laughed and kept running. A year ago, he would have moved without asking whether help was wanted. It was not redemption. Redemption was too large a word for ordinary change. It was practice. And practice, repeated long enough, becomes character. Evelyn called her toward the stage for a photograph. Lorraine turned to go. Madam Secretary, he hesitated. Thank you for bringing me into that convoy. I didn't bring you because I believed in you. I know. Make sure you keep knowing it. She walked toward the lights. Behind her, the young officer resumed his patrol, walking slowly, listening when people spoke, one hand resting near the badge that his father had told him was not a crown. The road into Briar Glen stayed open long past midnight. Cars passed beneath the pines one by one, carrying families home, and nothing turned them aside.